So, J. Ruud, what lovable book are we talking about today?
Well, Stacey Margaret Jones, I'll give you a hint. The Opioid Crisis.
Wow, I mean, some books come to mind, but I know they're not on your list. I do not know what to guess.
Okay.
All right. Welcome to Between the Covers, the podcast where author J. Ruud and I, author Stacey Margaret Jones, discuss one novel from his carefully cultivated and researched list of the 100 most lovable novels in the English language. And this week, we are talking about a book I have yet to guess. I need another hint.
Here is hint number 2. The Eagle Scout of Trailer Trash.
Oh, man, I read this book.
No.
Oh, okay, then I don't feel as bad. Although sometimes I do guess these. So
Yes, you do.
All right, give me the third hint, please.
Third hint is David Copperfield.
Okay, I know it, but I don't because I haven't read it. It's by that one woman, and it sounds like David Copperfield,
Yes.
but it isn't.
No, it isn't.
So I have guessed correctly.
You have it in mind vaguely. Yes, it's Demon Copperhead.
Demon Copperhead, and it's
by Barbara Kingsolver.
Barbara Kingsolver. Okay.
The winner of the Pulitzer Prize in 2023.
Yeah, it's the 20. It's the 20s now, not the 19s.
Yeah, 2023.
Okay. So, awesome.
So this is the most recent book on my list.
Oh, well, that's exciting. Okay, so before we get into some of the other things, how long is this book?
It's about 550 pages.
Okay, so an investment in time.
Pretty good.
You're going to
Pretty good
be,
investment.
you spend some time with that book.
But, it's 300 pages less than David Copperfield.
There you go. It's if you don't want to read David Copperfield, you can just pick this book up as the abridged.
Yeah, slightly abridged
Sure.
version.
And you said, when did it come out? 2023?
2023
Yeah, okay.
was the
All right.
year it won the Pulitzer.
All right.
So I guess it probably came out in 2022.
So who else likes this book? Who else, along with you, thinks this is a book of note?
Well, it's a little more of a challenge to answer that question with this book than with a lot of them because it's so recent that it hasn't had time to make it onto a lot of lists. However,
But it was sweeping more than the nation.
However, it does appear on the 2024 list published by TrueLit subreddit.
I love that you're quoting subreddits now.
TrueLit's 100 Best Books of the Quarter Century, compiled by votes from readers worldwide as number 79. In 2024 also, the New York Times published a well-publicized list of the 100 best books of the 21st century so far, on which they listed David Copperfield, Demon Copperhead
See, I'm going to do that the whole time,
as
too.
number 61. And later that year, as a direct response to the New York Times list, the book enthusiast Substack
All right.
published its own 100 best books of the 21st century, on which Kingsolver's book is much more highly regarded as number 6.
Okay.
And finally, in a reader's poll published by the New York Times, again as an answer to their own official list, called Readers Pick Their 100 Best Books of the 21st Century, Demon Copperhead came in as number 1.
Oh, wow.
The
Okay.
favorite novel of readers.
So people like Demon Copperhead.
They do.
All right.
And they should.
Can you rise to the challenge of the down and dirty summary? What is this book about?
Well, let me give you a down and dirty summary.
All right.
It's a reimagining of the quintessentially British Dickens 19th century story as a 21st century slice of American Appalachian life. And Kingsolver focuses on the Appalachians and the poverty in them and the effects of that poverty on children, especially children whose parents have been victims of that poverty and are dead or imprisoned. She attacks the ineptitude and bureaucracy of child welfare services, the abuse of the system of foster care that allows people like Damon's foster parents to take children solely for the sake of taking the monthly support money, and for obtaining slave labor, like a tobacco farmer that is his first foster family. And she attacks a justice system that will accept the testimony of an abusive stepfather rather than the word of the abused child. And more than anything else, she attacks the opioid crisis. And she gives a merciless indictment of the doctors, the salesmen, the druggists, and especially the Sackler-owned Purdue Pharma in the novel.
Right. Okay. All right. You were getting mighty close to the edge, but I'll give you Harps of Glory first. Well, that's cool because actually I knew that it was obviously a shout out to David Copperfield, but I really didn't know anything about it. I didn't realize it had the opioid crisis as its central motif.
Yeah, I mean, it's the central motif of at least the second half of the book.
Okay.
The child welfare stuff is probably the main target of the first half of the book.
When is it set?
It's
when and where?
Contemporary.
Yeah.
I mean,
It has to start.
it has to start back when
Sometime.
when Demon and Copperfield is Copperhead
We're going to be so
is
confusing.
born, and at the time he's writing it, which at the time he's telling the story, which seems to be contemporary with the publication, it's probably 20-some years later. So,
Okay.
So it begins maybe around 2000 or so.
Oh, okay. So it is a novel concerned with the 21st century.
Yeah.
And it's in Appalachia.
The thing is, Dickens' novel is all about the protagonist's struggle to rise above child poverty in a society that seems like it's structured to keep him down. And that's exactly what's happening to Damon.
Yeah. Is it pronounced Damon or Demon?
Well, his actual name is Damon, but his nickname is Demon.
Okay.
His actual name is Damon Fields, but he has red hair. So his nickname among the kids becomes Demon Copperhead because he has
That's
a
interesting
head.
that within the world of the novel, his name isn't a callback to David Copperfield.
No, but
we
obviously
know
it is,
that
yeah.
that's what she's using that's where she's kind of advancing the conversation, as we would say in discourse communities, right?
Yeah. And if you know David Copperfield, most of the things that happen in this book have parallels in David Copperfield, and almost all of the characters in the book have a parallel in David Copperfield. Some things are really obvious if you know anything about David Copperfield. Demon Copperheads. Well, he has a mother who is kind of helpless. It's in his own voice as David Copperfield is. And,
So it's first person.
Yeah. And Dickens' David Copperfield famously opens with the sentence, "Whether I shall turn out to be the hero of my own life, or whether that station will be held by anybody else, these pages must show."
Is David Copperfield what Melanie reads to
Yes.
everybody in Gone with the Wind?
Yes,
Chapter
it is.
1, I was born.
I am born.
I am born.
And chapter 1 of Demon Copperhead is I am born.
Yeah.
And he starts out, "First, I got myself born. A decent crowd was on hand to watch, and they've always given me that much. The worst of the job was up to me, my mother being, let's just say, out of it." Because his mother
Is high?
She's an addict, and she gets clean some of the time. They have neighbors, the Peggotts, who kind of watch over Damon's mother. In David Copperfield, his nurse is named Peggotty.
Okay, so
So there's a pretty close parallel there. His mother, in David Copperfield, his mother marries this guy who turns out to be just an absolute terror, who tyrannizes the mother and David. And his name is Murdstone. And Demon Copperhead's mother marries this biker guy named Stoner.
Yeah.
So Stoner and Murdstone
Right.
are the stepfathers who essentially drive the mother to death.
Right. Well, and I can't help but think that merde is related to the French word for merde, right?
Maybe.
I mean-
I think maybe it's more related to murder.
Oh, sure. Well,
But,
both.
maybe
Both
both.
things.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because, forgive my ignorance here, is Dickens writing at the beginning of or the kind of onset of the Industrial Revolution?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
he's writing about the societal impacts of industry.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's really interesting how we're still having the same conversation, right? I was listening to a podcast recently about capitalism and how do we define capitalism? How capitalistic is the United States versus other countries, right? And one of the podcast hosts said, you know, the rejoinder always is, well, what else would work? What other system really is there that works? And her answer is, who does capitalism work for? How is it working for you, right?
Yeah.
Like, and when you think about Dickensian characters, capitalism in the Industrial Revolution is not working particularly well for them, and it seems like it's still crushing people.
Well, it's certainly crushing the
Centuries
people,
later.
Yeah, the people in the part of Virginia, Lee County, Virginia, where Damon lives, was once a thriving coal mining district, but the coal is gone and nobody's employed. So
Because there, instead of the Industrial Revolution, now you have people who are victimized, so to speak, by the capitalistic information age.
yeah,
So coal mining has left, right?
yeah,
Because capital can move all over the world.
yeah, but people can't.
like lightning, right? But labor can't.
Yeah. There's a teacher in Damon's middle school and high school named Mr. Armstrong, and he is the one adult in the book that kind of understands these things.
Mm-hmm.
He's an advisor, but he's also a history teacher.
I was going to say he has the long view.
Yeah, and what he tells his class about their situation is summed up by Damon in the book. Once upon a time, we had our honest living that was God and country. Then the world turns and there's no God anymore, no country. But it's still in your blood that coal is God's gift, and you want to believe, because otherwise it was one more scam in the fuck train that railroaded over these mountains since George Washington rode in and set his crew to cutting down our trees. Everything that could be taken is gone. Mountains left with their heads blown off, rivers running black. My people are dead of trying or headed that way, addicted as we are to keeping ourselves alive. That's his summation of what capitalist economy has
Right.
done to the people of this part of the country.
Right. And how it takes everything and moves on.
Yeah.
But the people are still left.
And then, of course, the drug companies
The
move in.
Sacklers.
The Sacklers.
We watched that limited series, and I read the book that it was based on, Dope Sick.
Yeah.
And did you think about that when you read this, or what order? Did you read this before we watched that? Do you remember?
I read it before we watched it.
Yeah. So were you thinking of it when you watched that show?
Yeah. And then I was thinking more about it when I reread the book.
Right. You were thinking
A
about the
short
show
time
again.
ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the show illustrates, and the show also takes the Sacklers to task because it depicts them. It's the dramatization,
Yeah.
but the book is journalistic, right?
Yeah.
So it does definitely go up the chain to those responsible.
Yeah, and the thing is, the salesman, for instance, we get to know a salesman a little bit here because he's dating one of the Peggotts,
Oh, okay.
who's actually a nurse. She's a nurse practitioner, in fact. And he keeps telling her things like, "Oh, No harm can come from this. It's just you don't want people to live in pain, do you?
Right,
And
the company
there's
line.
no evidence that it's addictive at all. And finally, she breaks up with this guy and really lays into the whole idea.
Because the evidence is all around her.
Oh, yeah. She sees it every day.
Yeah.
And Damon is finally rescued from his foster situation by a friend of Betsy's. There's Aunt Betsy in David Copperfield. The Betsy in Demon Copperhead is his grandmother. But both Betsy's have this guy who lives with them named Dick, who seems like he's not all there and flies kites, but is actually got a lot of good advice. And I think in both cases, well, David walks to find his Aunt Betsy and finally gets there, and Aunt Betsy says, what should we do with him, Dick? And Dick says, wash him, because he's been on the road and he's really dirty. Exactly the same thing happens in Damon Copperhead. What should we do with him? Wash him. So there's those kinds of things that are just close to the book. But anyway, Damon is rescued by being fostered by a friend of Betsy's, who happens to be the coach of the high school football team in Damon's hometown, the Generals. And the coach's daughter, who Damon at first thinks is a boy because her hair's cut short, is named Angus. And he says, you mean like the cow? But Angus is sort of her nickname, just like Demon is his. Her real name is Agnes. And he finally, like after a day, realizes that she's a girl. And she parallels a character in David Copperfield whose name is Agnes. And when she comes into the story, if you've read David Copperfield, you know how important she's going to be.
Oh, okay.
Which doesn't seem quite as obvious if you haven't. Anyway, Damon becomes a star football player. He's a tight end for about a year when he's a sophomore. And then he gets blocked from the side by somebody who kind of gives him a dirty hit, and he wrecks his knee. And the doctor prescribes
There you go.
opioids. So that starts him on that particular decline.
So Damon.
Damon, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
What's an oxy, I'd asked. That November, it was still a shiny new thing. OxyContin, God's gift for the laid-off deep-hole man with his back and neck bones grinding like bags of gravel. For the bent-over lady pulling double shifts at Dollar General, with her shot knees and ADHD grandkids to raise by herself. For every football player with some of this or that torn up, and the whole world riding on his getting back in the game. This was our deliverance. The tree was shaken, and yes, we did eat of the apple. And he goes into a real decline.
Oh, yeah.
Once he's addicted to it.
It's insidious. And I was talking about the Dope Sick show, but I was thinking about the book Empire of Pain by Patrick Radden Keefe. And that's the reportage that that follows the Sackler family as well as the opioid epidemic among the people that are hurt by it. Yeah. And it really, I think, builds a lot of sympathy for people because, we like to judge people and their addictions. I guess it makes us feel like we won't be addicted to anything when we're all probably addicted to something. But it shows you how innocently you can become just a zombie.
Yeah.
Like he didn't do anything wrong, right? No. He was hurt, and a trusted medical professional prescribed the thing that was going to ruin his life.
Yeah.
Ruin his body and mind.
Yeah. And the Sacklers knew that it was addictive.
Yes.
And they didn't care.
No, they just wanted to make the money.
But the doctors thought, we've been having good luck with this. It's cured people's pain. So, take this much, and then they have to keep taking more for it to get to really work. And then finally the doctors realize what's been going on, or some of them do.
And some of the doctors become addicted.
And some of the doctors become addicted, and some of them are making money by selling it.
Opening those pill clinics
and
pill factories.
Yeah, so they just become part of the problem.
Yeah.
It's
chilling.
The story of Demon Copperhead is the story of the people of those hills, that part of the country, and the ways in which they've been screwed through history.
Yes, because the waves of history have scraped over them, right? And taken everything out.
Yeah.
And left them there to suffer and struggle.
Yeah.
And I felt when reading Empire of Pain, I just felt so fortunate and literally lucky. Like somebody spun a roulette wheel and I didn't end up getting this prescribed to me.
Yeah.
Because anybody can, anywhere.
Yeah.
And because of the physical suffering that goes along with the jobs that are in that part of the country, right?
Yeah.
The mining and
tobacco. Tobacco is another of the aspects that have screwed the people.
Right.
Because, at first, growing the tobacco is what's keeping them afloat. The farmers can grow that and make a lot of money. And then, wait a minute.
Right. Wait, suddenly, we found out something is terribly wrong.
Yeah, something's terribly wrong. But, as the campaign against smoking goes on, they're carrying signs that say, keep smoking.
Right, right.
But that's a big loss for the farmers. Then there's the loss of the coal mines.
Yes,
Then there's the let's screw them now that they're down and out by getting them hooked on this oxy stuff.
Let's get even more money out of this poor region.
Out of this that doesn't have any money.
Right. And no responsibility is taken.
No.
And it's a tragedy.
Damon has...
If you take a drink every time he mixes those up, you'll need to seek medical care.
Damon has a comment that sort of sums everything up very succinctly. Live long enough and all things you've ever loved can turn around and scorch you blind.
Yeah.
The wonder is that you could start life with nothing, end with nothing, and lose so much in between.
Well, yeah. And like I said earlier, we all have some kind of addiction to maybe things that we use for distraction from pain, right? And I always joke about that Welsh saying, we started with nothing and we've still got most of it.
We got most of it.
And I think that's applicable to that part of the United States.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they still have most of it.
Well,
they're pretty bereft and they've been harmed and they are owed a debt.
Yeah.
And, who's going to pay it? But it sounds like, it sounds like such a dark, upsetting novel. I have two questions for you. I'll ask the obvious one second. This is obviously, as you've talked many times about, it's in conversation with, it's an ode to David Copperfield.
Yeah.
Those kinds of books are not fun to read unless they bring something new to this classic, right?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, it can't just be that it's David Copperfield set in contemporary Appalachia.
No.
So what is it that Kingsolver is able to imbue this with that makes it the book that all these people love so much?
Well,
it's using David Copperfield, but it obviously is something completely new and inventive and engaging and, enticing. What is it?
What's engaging and enticing?
What is new?
Well,
What's novel about the novel?
Let me tell you what she herself wrote about it. There's an afterword to the novel where she writes, I am grateful to Charles Dickens for writing David Copperfield. His impassioned critique of institutional poverty and its damaging effects on children in his society. those problems are still with us. So I mean, that's one thing she really wants. That's the reason she's using David Copperfield, is to show that it was bad then, and the same shit is still going on.
It's like that protest sign that people carry that says, "I can't believe I still have to protest this shit."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
After 170 years.
Yeah.
Those problems, she says, are still with us. In adapting his novel to my own place and time, working for years with his outrage, inventiveness, and empathy at my elbow, I've come to think of him as my genius friend.
Oh, I love that. Gives me chills.
What is new about it is it's very contemporary, and it deals with specific problems.
Which he did, right?
Yeah.
He dealt with specific problems of his era.
His own time. And
time and
she
place.
deals with very specific problems of this time and this place.
Which makes the point even more emphatically, why are we still doing this to ourselves and to our fellow man and woman and child?
Yeah. The similarity you see from the beginning, but you don't have to have read David Copperfield to love this book.
Right.
And I
imagine a lot of people haven't read.
I know a lot of people. I know some people who I know have really liked this book.
Who haven't read
David Copperfield, and in some cases didn't even know that it had anything to do with David Copperfield.
Oh, how wonderful. I like that.
But it does stand alone by itself. But knowing something about David Copperfield does bring...
Enriches?
Yeah, it enriches your reading of it.
Sure.
And the contrasts. The contrast from that first chapter, the voice that you hear from David Copperfield, and then compared to the voice that you hear from
Copperhead.
Copperhead. David Copperfield's is very controlled and sedate, kind of, and British. And Demon Copperhead's voice just comes kind of blaring off the page at you, and in very American accent. In fact, it really reminds you of Huck Finn, I think.
Oh, okay.
Because the expressions are so perfectly American and specifically of that time and place. In fact, you'll be interested in this. The people in the book, when they want to say when,
they say
will
whenever.
always say whenever.
Yes.
Whenever I was young, this happened.
I heard somebody from Northern Ireland say that on like the social apps the other day, and I was like, is that where it comes from? Like people from there came to the South, and because
it's possible.
Yeah, I wrote a
suppose.
poem a long time ago because when we moved here, I was really struck by people who said, whenever I was young, like it was a situation that could happen at any time with surprise. You know, like you might wake up tomorrow and be a child again and then say, whenever I'm young, or
Whenever I'm young, I do that.
yeah, that is interesting. But yeah, she obviously, people also wouldn't love this book if she weren't authentically portraying this part of the world.
Yeah.
People don't like that. If you're trying something on and you're not getting it right.
No.
So.
But this is the part of the world she's from.
So my obvious question then is, why is the book lovable when it is about something that feels like, if we're still talking about this almost 2 centuries later, it feels hopeless?
Yeah. In fact, to get to the other question that you're bound to ask.
Well, that was my question.
Why would people not like this book?
Oh, well, yeah.
That's why they wouldn't like the book, I think. That it, in fact, the few negative reviews that it got were from people who said that, this is just kind of unmitigated
Pain
and crisis, and it's hopeless.
Then why is it lovable?
Because it isn't hopeless.
Oh.
I mean, ultimately in David Copperfield, David has a talent for writing, and he's able to use that and finally kind of bring himself out of poverty. Demon has a talent for art, for drawing. And he has an art teacher in high school who encourages him. In fact, it's the wife of Mr. Armstrong, the communist. That's what the people in town call him, who is the teacher who talks about this history. But she convinces him that this is a talent that he has, he has a friend, a former foster kid that worked with him at the tobacco farm, named Tommy, similar to David Copperfield, who has an old friend named Tommy who kind of helps him out later as he's starting really on his career. Tommy works at the newspaper. He's got a job at the newspaper, and he's become a kind of editor there after some years. And they complain to each other about the comic strips that nobody in their part of the world can relate to these. And there's one kind of comic strip about hillbillies that just essentially portrays them as just being dumb. They always talk about TV shows doing that too.
Right. Or when you want to show somebody's dumb, you give them a Southern accent.
Yeah.
Or make them seem like a hick or something.
Yeah. So Damon starts to draw his own comic strip. And Tommy kind of helps him with some of the plot lines. And it's their actual world and not the one that people make fun of.
Right.
And so that could ultimately be a way out. We don't know that actually happens because he does have to drop out of high school, and he does meet a girl named Dora. In David Copperfield, Dora is David Copperfield's child wife, he calls her, because she's so inept at doing anything.
Oh, okay.
And Dora that Damon gets involved with is an addict, and he drops out of school to take care of her. Also, he drops out of school because he's an addict. But anyway, he has to stop working on the strip at that point. So it still seems pretty hopeless.
I was going to say, this is the hopeful part. Okay.
But ultimately, he has a kind of revelation, and the Peggott woman, who's the nurse practitioner, kind of gets him into rehab. And he starts to turn his life around, and he realizes that his life is turned around. And he says, I've tried in this telling time and time again to pinpoint the moment where everything starts to fall apart. Everything meaning me. But there's also the opposite, where some little nut cracks open inside you and a tree starts to grow even harder to nail, because that thing's going to be growing a long time before you notice. Years maybe. Then one day you say, that little crack between my ears has turned into this whole damn tree of wonderful. So he can turn around.
Yeah.
He can turn his life around, and he's able to do it. And the book ends on a hopeful note.
Okay. Don't go too far.
I'm not going to go.
But it reminds me of that.
Precisely what happens.
I just had sent this in a text to my brothers that hope is a revolutionary patience. That's the quote from Anne Lamott. And I think I have my own experience with that is when you feel hopeless or when you're down or when you're very unhappy. My own experience is there's a little voice in my brain that says, I could be happy. And then I can start to fixate on what little thing, if it's, he draws a comic book, right? There's, what little thing can I do toward this to reinforce this hope that even if I don't feel I want to feel.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, where do you rank this on your current list? What number is it?
I'm going to put it at number 15.
Okay.
So right after The Great Gatsby.
Ooh.
And right before Mrs. Dalloway.
Goodness. Got some big friends there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. Well, this was a fun conversation. I really had no idea what it was about, except that it was inspired by fictional events.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you really ought to read it.
Yes, I know.
In fact, all of you ought to read it. All y'all.
Because it's
should read
lovable.
this. Yeah.
It's lovable. All right. Well, you've convinced me. I mean, I don't know when I'll read it, but now I am very interested in doing so, especially because you don't read a lot of nonfiction, none now, because you're very involved in your project. But after reading Empire of Pain, I would really welcome a kind of novelization, so to speak, of of those themes, because that book is very, very well done.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Okay, then. I think perhaps we have gotten to the point of the show where it's time for Chaos Reader.
All right. Well, last time I mentioned that I had finished Good Material by Dolly Alderton. And that means it's time for my first presidential biography of the year. Given the rate I'm reading, it may be my last presidential. I tried to read 2 a year. Last year, I only read 1. Last year, I read a very long biography of Johnson. Lyndon Baines Johnson. Not Andrew. I have read a biography of him.
I know. And doing them chronologically.
Chronologically, because I'm very sequential and structured.
Not at all chaotic.
Not at all chaotic in that way. And so I'm reading this. Full disclosure, I just picked it up because I am going to read next Richard Nixon, The Life by John A. Farrell, which was a Pulitzer Prize finalist. And did we get this at the Nixon Library?
Yeah, I think so.
So one of my goals also is to visit a site for each American president. I'm not doing those in order because that's hard.
Yeah,
would be inefficient.
Driving cross country all the time.
Yeah, that's inefficient. But we did go to the Nixon Library in Yorba Linda, which I found to be fascinating because when the president is no longer alive, the historians can really get to work, and they have a fascinating room of digital information there where you can essentially Google, or, look up different topics and documents and listen to recordings and stuff that have to do with his crimes as a president. I guess in the theme of, I can't believe we still have to protest this business. I'm going to read this book about Nixon, and it's pretty long. There's lots of notes, but I'm looking forward to it. And one of the things that I like when I read these books is I always look for the first mention of the next president in this. So, like, when does the next president come on the scene of this person's life, right? So I guess I'll be looking for Ford.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting. But I'm looking forward to it. So I'll keep you updated.
Okay.
Probably talking about it in a lot of episodes.
Many episodes.
But
all right.
Well, thank you for listening, and please share, comment on our podcast. Put it on your social media if you are so inclined. And we want to thank all of our listeners and our podcast production sensei, Jerry Bruno, and everybody who helps us with the podcast by liking, sharing, commenting, etc. And we will see you next week on Between the Covers.